The silence was deafening as she stood before the military tribunal. Former Navy Commander Zara Blackwood faced down her accusers with unwavering resolve, the weight of her medals contrasting sharply with the heaviness that filled the courtroom. The presiding officer's voice cut through the tension like a blade, dripping with contempt as he stared down at her. "You think your decorations make you untouchable, Commander. You're nothing but a coward who endangered American lives." What happened next would shake the entire naval hierarchy to its core and expose a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of military command. She leaned toward the microphone and whispered 3 words that made seasoned military officials question everything they thought they knew about honor, duty, and the price of telling the truth. From which part of the world are you watching this incredible story unfold today? If tales of military honor, hidden truths, and the fight for justice captivate you, hit that subscribe button for more classified stories that reveal what really happens behind the closed doors of military power. The Naval Base San Diego military courtroom held an unsettling sterility that seemed to amplify every whispered conversation and shuffled paper. Its oak paneling and polished brass fixtures failed to provide any warmth to the proceedings unfolding within its walls. Commander Zara Blackwood sat with perfect military posture in her dress blue uniform, ribbons and medals creating a constellation of honor across her chest. Her hands rested on the table before her, left thumb occasionally tracing a crescent-shaped scar that ran across her right wrist, a private ritual unnoticed by anyone else in the room, a nervous habit developed during her most classified deployments. The court-martial had already stretched into its 6th day. Video evidence played on multiple screens throughout the chamber, showing Operation Nightfall unfolding in stark black and white detail. Thermal signatures moved through what appeared to be a residential compound in Eastern Europe. Radio chatter provided a clinical soundtrack to what prosecutors called the most egregious case of insubordination in recent naval history. The mission, a high-priority extraction in a location still deemed classified, had gone catastrophically wrong when Blackwood refused a direct order to engage despite clear authorization from command. Her reasoning, new intelligence suggested potential non-combatants in the strike zone. Captain Maximilian Sterling, lead prosecutor with silver hair and the perpetual demeanor of someone who'd never questioned an order in his 32-year career, stood center stage in the courtroom. His dress uniform bore nearly as many decorations as Blackwood's, though his had been earned primarily through administrative excellence and desk assignments rather than field operations. He gestured to the technician who operated the audio-visual equipment with practiced precision. "Play the damning transmission again," Sterling commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. The speakers crackled to life. "Nighthawk leader, you are weapons free. Execute immediately. Execute now." A Blackwood's voice responded clearly through the static. "Negative control. New intelligence suggests civilian presence in target building, requesting immediate mission abort." "That's a direct order, Nighthawk. You will execute this mission now, sir. I cannot comply in good conscience. Too many unknowns. Request stand down." The assembled officers and officials shifted uncomfortably in their seats, a ripple of discomfort moving through the gallery like a wave. In the front row sat Admiral Constantine Meredith, his weathered face maintaining a mask of neutrality that seemed somehow out of place for what should have been a straightforward disciplinary hearing. His steel, gray eyes, however, never left Blackwood's face, studying her with an intensity that suggested deeper currents flowing beneath the surface of these proceedings. His fingers drummed silently against his leg, a tell that those who knew him would recognize as profound concern. Major Penelope Chen, Blackwood's defense counsel, rose from her position with fluid grace. Her black hair was styled in a precise chignon, her uniform pressed to perfection that spoke of attention to detail and professional competence. The defense maintains that Commander Blackwood acted within established rules of engagement when presented with credible, actionable intelligence regarding potential civilian casualties. She stated clearly, her voice cutting through the tension. "The rules of engagement clearly state that protection of non-combatants takes precedence over mission completion when circumstances change. Rules of engagement do not override direct orders during active operations," interrupted Judge Advocate General Marcus Thornfield from his elevated position on the bench. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the tone of someone accustomed to final verdicts and unquestioned decisions. His angular face showed no sympathy, only the cold calculation of military justice. "Your Honor, if I may continue," Chen persisted, undeterred by the interruption. "We request access to Commander Blackwood's complete service record, including her classified deployments with specialized units, Her decision-making process can only be fully understood within the context of her extensive operational history and the experiences that informed her tactical assessment. Thornfield's expression hardened perceptibly, his jaw tightening. Request categorically denied. This court is concerned solely with the events of September 23 and Commander Blackwood's refusal to obey direct orders. Previous deployments are irrelevant to the charges of insubordination and dereliction of duty currently before this tribunal. Something flickered across Blackwood's face, so brief that only the most observant spectators would have caught it. A momentary tightening around her eyes, a slight adjustment of her shoulders that spoke of recognition and concern. From her position at the defendant's table, she noticed a woman in civilian clothes taking detailed notes in the gallery's back section. When their eyes met momentarily, recognition sparked between them, though Blackwood couldn't immediately place where she had encountered this individual before. The woman's presence seemed somehow significant, though she couldn't determine why. The first day's proceedings had concluded with testimony from Blackwood's immediate commanding officer, Captain Wesley Bradford, who described her as exceptional in most respects but noted what he termed concerning instances of questioning orders in recent months. His testimony painted a picture of a once reliable officer whose judgment had become increasingly erratic. As the courtroom began to empty, Blackwood watched with growing unease as Admiral Meredith exchanged hushed, urgent words with an unidentified civilian before both men exited through a side passage rather than the main entrance used by other attendees. Chen gathered her papers with visible frustration, her movements sharp and precise. "They're constraining us at every turn, Commander. Without access to your full service record, establishing proper context for your decision becomes nearly impossible. This feels less like a court-martial and more like a predetermined outcome." "It wouldn't matter anyway," Blackwood replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some things aren't documented in official files. Some experiences can't be reduced to paperwork and formal reports." Chen studied her client carefully, noting the tension in her posture and the way her eyes seemed to focus on something beyond the immediate surroundings. "Care to expand on that statement, Commander?" "No." Blackwood stood, adjusting her uniform jacket with mechanical precision. "Some secrets are meant to stay buried, Major. Some ghosts should remain undisturbed." The second day proceeded with methodical precision, much like the first. Technical experts testified about operational parameters and intelligence assessments preceding the mission. Blackwood listened attentively to every word, but offered little visible reaction to even the most damning testimony. Her composure remained unshakable throughout detailed presentations of satellite imagery, communications intercepts, and tactical assessments that painted her refusal to engage as a clear breach of military discipline. Only when a junior intelligence officer, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, mentioned potential civilian presence with what he termed moderate confidence, did Blackwood lean forward slightly, her eyes fixing on the young man with laser-like intensity. Under Chen's skillful cross-examination, Webb admitted that this warning had indeed been included in the pre-mission briefing packet, though it had been classified as unconfirmed and low priority by higher command levels. By the third day, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted noticeably and unmistakably. Where there had been professional detachment and routine proceedings, there was now an almost palpable hostility directed specifically toward Blackwood. Word had spread through the officer corps about the proceedings, drawing several new faces to the gallery, senior officers whose presence seemed designed to send a very clear message about the consequences of questioning authority. Judge Thornfield began this crucial day by addressing pending motions with unusual haste. The defense's request to call character witnesses from Commander Blackwood's former specialized units is denied due to operational security concerns that cannot be compromised. Additionally, this court will accept into evidence the comprehensive psychological evaluation conducted by Commander Rebecca Phillips of Naval Medical Command. Chen was on her feet immediately, her objection sharp and pointed. "Your Honor, that evaluation was conducted without proper notification to Defense Counsel, and the findings directly contradict Commander Blackwood's regular psychological assessments conducted throughout her 17-year career. We move for its exclusion. The evaluation was ordered as part of these proceedings, and is therefore fully admissible," Thornfield stated with finality, his tone brooking no argument. "Colonel Sterling, you may proceed with your examination." Sterling approached the bench with a manila folder tucked under his arm, his movements deliberate and confident. The prosecution calls Commander Zara Blackwood to the stand. A Blackwood moved with the fluid precision of someone accustomed to high-stakes situations, took the oath with unwavering eye contact, and assumed her position in the witness stand with military bearing intact. If she felt any anxiety about facing direct examination from a prosecutor clearly intent on destroying her career, her demeanor revealed nothing to the observant gallery. Sterling began methodically, establishing her extensive training, multiple combat deployments, and leadership roles with surgical precision. His approach was calculated and systematic, building her up as a competent officer before systematically tearing down her credibility. When he shifted focus to Operation Nightfall, his tone became razor, sharp and unforgiving. "Commander Blackwood, would you characterize yourself as someone who follows orders without question, as befitting a military officer?" "I would characterize myself as someone who follows lawful orders while maintaining situational awareness, Captain. Yet Commander Phillips' evaluation suggests you suffer from what she terms command anxiety and decision paralysis in high-stress situations. Would you agree with that clinical assessment?" "I would not, sir. That assessment is both inaccurate and unprofessional." Sterling paced slowly before the witness stand, his movements predatory and calculated. "Your team was specifically selected for this extraction because of its extraordinary complexity and sensitivity. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Did you feel overwhelmed by the weight of that responsibility?" "No, sir. My team was fully prepared for all contingencies as briefed during our extensive pre-mission preparation." "Then explain to this court why, when given explicit, unambiguous authorization to proceed from your entire chain of command, you suddenly decided you possessed superior judgment to seasoned intelligence professionals and operational planners." Blackwood took a measured breath before responding, her voice steady and professional. "New intelligence emerged during the operation itself. Proceeding with the original mission parameters would have violated both our established rules of engagement and international humanitarian law." Sterling's next question cut through the courtroom atmosphere like a blade, designed for maximum impact. "Would you say your feminine instincts and emotional sensibilities made you hesitate when decisive, masculine action was required to complete this critical mission?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Several officers in the gallery looked visibly uncomfortable with this line of questioning, shifting in their seats and exchanging concerned glances. "Objection." Chen shot to her feet, her voice ringing with indignation. "That question is inappropriate, irrelevant, and blatantly sexist. It has no bearing on the charges before this court. I'll allow it," Tornfield ruled, surprising even Sterling with his decision. The defendant's decision, making process and psychological state are central to these charges of insubordination. The Blackwood's expression remained carefully controlled, though something dangerous flickered behind her eyes, a glimpse of the warrior that lay beneath the diplomatic surface. "My instincts and training have kept teams alive across 4 different theaters of operation over 17 years of service, Captain. My gender has never been a factor in my operational effectiveness, and it wasn't relevant to my tactical assessment that night. And yet you froze when bold, decisive action was required to complete a mission critical to national security. I made a carefully considered tactical assessment based on evolving intelligence and changing circumstances on the ground. That's not freezing, Captain, that's leadership and responsible command." The questioning continued relentlessly for nearly 4 hours, growing increasingly personal and pointed with each exchange. When Blackwood attempted to reference a previous classified operation code named Oranbridge as precedent for her decision-making process and tactical methodology, Thornfield immediately and forcefully shut her down. "That operation is classified far beyond the scope of this court-martial and will not be discussed," he declared with unusual firmness and evident concern. "Move on immediately, Captain Sterling." "With all due respect, Your Honor," Blackwood countered, her voice carrying a new edge of determination. "The tactical parallels between Iron Bridge and Nightfall directly informed my operational assessment and decision-making process. The similarities are too significant to ignore." "The court has ruled definitively, Commander," Thornfield said sharply, his voice rising slightly. "You will not reference classified operations outside the scope of these proceedings." As the day's grueling proceedings neared their conclusion, Sterling circled back to the controversial psychological evaluation with renewed vigor. "Commander, if not command anxiety or decision paralysis as suggested by medical professionals, how would you characterize your refusal to follow direct orders from superior officers?" "Moral courage and professional responsibility," Blackwood replied without hesitation, her voice clear and unwavering. "Moral courage," Sterling repeated with obvious skepticism, letting the words hang in the air. "Above the strategic objectives of your classified mission, above the explicit orders of your experienced superiors, above operational security concerns that you weren't privy to at your level? Some lines should never be crossed, Captain, regardless of who gives the order or what justifications are offered. As Blackwood returned to her seat beside Chen, Thornfield looked directly at her with an expression of barely concealed disdain and something approaching personal animosity. This court has seen nothing in these proceedings to suggest you are anything exceptional or heroic, Commander, he stated for the official record, his words carefully chosen for maximum impact. You're not a patriot or a hero. You're a liability to the brave men and women who depend on you for leadership and decisive action. The gallery watched in uncomfortable silence, the tension palpable and oppressive. In the back row, a Pentagon liaison Blackwood hadn't noticed before spoke urgently into a secure communication device, his attention fixed intently on the proceedings with obvious concern. As she took her seat beside Chen, Blackwood noticed something she had missed in previous days. On Thornfield's desk, partially hidden beneath case files and legal documents, lay a folder marked with classification symbols she recognized and bearing an emblem she hadn't seen in years, one that absolutely shouldn't have been present in these proceedings. The symbol belonged to operations so classified they officially didn't exist. For the first time since the court-martial began, Zara Blackwood felt something other than resigned determination. Recognition flashed across her carefully controlled features as she straightened in her chair and met Thornfield's gaze directly. The judge's expression flickered momentarily, uncertainty and what might have been fear replacing his previous condescension, as he sensed the fundamental shift in dynamics between them. Court is adjourned until 0800 tomorrow morning, Thornfield announced with unusual haste, gathering his materials with movements that seemed almost frantic, at which time this tribunal will render its final verdict on all charges. As the courtroom began to empty, Chen leaned close to her client, concern evident in her voice. What just happened? Commander. You look like you've seen a ghost, and Thornfield looked like he was about to bolt from the room. The Blackwood watched Thornfield exit through his private chamber's door, the classified folder secured tightly under his arm, his departure more flight than dignified exit. Not yet, Major, she replied quietly, her voice carrying undertones Chen had never heard before. But tomorrow morning, everyone else in this room will. Dawn over Naval Base San Diego brought an unusual clarity that seemed to mirror the building tension spreading across the entire installation like wildfire. By 0730, the corridor outside the courtroom had filled with officers and officials who hadn't been present for any previous sessions. Hushed conversations filled the space, but these fell into complete silence whenever Blackwood or her counsel approached, creating an atmosphere of barely contained anticipation and dread. Zara Blackwood had arrived 45 minutes early, her dress uniform maintained to absolute perfection. She sat alone in the small preparation room adjacent to the courtroom, reviewing what appeared to be her official service record. Though she knew this sanitized version omitted crucial years of her career, years simply labeled special assignment or training rotation that told nothing of the reality she had lived. Major Chen entered carrying her briefcase and wearing an expression of profound concern and confusion. Commander, something extraordinary is happening. Admiral Rodriguez just arrived with her entire staff. The Chief of Naval Operations sent a personal representative. There are people here from the Defense Secretary's office, and I've counted at least 3 individuals who appear to be from intelligence agencies. The security presence has tripled overnight. Blackwood looked up from her papers, her expression unreadable but her eyes alert. Are you surprised by this development, Major? Should I be? Chen asked, studying her client with the intense scrutiny of someone trying to solve a complex puzzle. You know something I don't you? Something significant that you haven't shared. Many things. Blackwood confirmed simply, closing the folder with deliberate care. After today's proceedings, so will Judge Thornfield and everyone else in that courtroom. When they entered the main courtroom at exactly 07:55, the transformation was immediately evident and shocking. The gallery had filled completely with senior officers, intelligence officials, and civilians whose professional bearing and alert postures suggested they were far more than casual observers. Admiral Meredith occupied his usual front-row position, but now he was accompanied by 2 stern individuals in dark suits who surveyed the room with the practiced vigilance of experienced security professionals. Most significantly, the civilian note taker Blackwood had noticed during earlier proceedings now sat directly behind the prosecution table, her focus fixed on Blackwood with an intensity that clearly indicated professional assessment rather than casual interest. Her presence seemed to carry weight that others in the room recognized and respected. At precisely 0800, Judge Thornfield entered, and the entire courtroom rose as one. If he was surprised or unsettled by the dramatically expanded and high-ranking audience, his carefully controlled expression didn't reveal it, though his eyes lingered momentarily on the senior brass in attendance, and those who knew him might have detected a slight tremor in his usually steady hands. "This court-martial is now in session," he announced with his characteristic authority, though his voice seemed to carry less confidence than in previous days. Having thoroughly reviewed all evidence presented, examined all testimony given, and considered the serious nature of the charges, this court is prepared to render final judgment in the matter of the United States Navy versus Commander Zara Blackwood on charges of insubordination, willful dereliction of duty, and conduct unbecoming a commissioned officer. Thornfield shuffled papers before him with unusual nervousness, his movements less fluid than his normal judicial precision. Before the verdict is formally announced, military law and established procedure provide the defendant with an opportunity for final statement. "Commander Blackwood, do you wish to address this court?" Chen touched her client's arm lightly, a silent question about strategy and approach, but Blackwood had already made her decision. She stood with fluid military grace, adjusting her uniform with mechanical precision, and moved toward the center of the courtroom with purpose that seemed to electrify the atmosphere. "Your Honor, I respectfully request permission to identify myself properly and completely for the official record." Thornfield sighed with obvious impatience, though there was something else in his expression now, a wariness that hadn't been present before. "Your name and rank are already properly established in court records, Commander." "Not completely, sir," Blackwood replied, her voice carrying a new edge that seemed to cut through the courtroom's tension like a knife. "May I approach the bench?" Thornfield hesitated for a moment, the first time he had shown uncertainty during the entire proceedings, then gestured his reluctant consent. Blackwood moved to the microphone positioned directly before the bench with military precision. For a long moment, she stood in complete silence, her posture shifting subtly in ways that only trained observers would notice. Something predatory and dangerous awakened in her bearing, a quality that had been carefully concealed and suppressed throughout all previous proceedings. She leaned toward the microphone and spoke just above a whisper, her words carrying clearly through the absolute silence. "Crimson eclipse." The reaction was immediate, electric, and devastating. A captain in the fourth row dropped his tablet, the metallic clatter cutting through the sudden silence like a gunshot. The Pentagon liaison Blackwood had noticed earlier stood abruptly, his face draining of color. Admiral Meredith's carefully maintained composure cracked completely for the first time, his weathered face showing shock, recognition, and what appeared to be reverence. Thornfield, clearly confused by the dramatic reaction rippling through his courtroom like a shockwave, frowned deeply and leaned forward. "What did you say, Commander?" Blackwood repeated it, her voice stronger and more commanding. "Crimson eclipse, February 2018 through August 2021. Task Force 77, classification level above your clearance. Your Honor." The courtroom erupted in hushed but urgent conversations as the full implications began to sink in. Several officers were already on secure phones, speaking in clipped, coded phrases that suggested immediate contact with higher authorities. Others sat in stunned silence, processing information that challenged everything they thought they knew about the proceedings. Thornfield banged his gavel repeatedly, but his demands for order fell on a courtroom that was rapidly slipping beyond his control or authority. "This court will have order," he insisted, raising his voice to a level that bordered on shouting. "Whatever game you think you're playing, Commander, this tribunal will not be." His words were cut off by a civilian in a dark suit who approached the bench with purposeful, urgent strides. The man moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to immediate access and unquestioned authority. He leaned close to Thornfield and spoke quietly, simultaneously handing him a secure phone that bore official government markings. Thornfield's expression transformed in real time as he listened to whoever was on the other end of that secure line, confusion giving way to shock, then to something approaching genuine fear as the full scope of his situation became clear. His hands visibly trembled as he held the phone, and his face grew pale as he absorbed information that clearly changed everything about these proceedings. "This court will recess for 2 hours," he announced, his voice noticeably unsteady and lacking its previous authority. "All personnel currently present will remain within the building under security protocols that are now in effect." As Thornfield hastily exited through his chamber's door, his departure more flight than dignified judicial recess, the courtroom dissolved into carefully controlled but obvious chaos. Officers formed tight clusters throughout the gallery, speaking in the low, urgent tones of people processing extraordinary information. The two men who had accompanied Admiral Meredith moved swiftly and professionally to secure the room's exits, politely but very firmly turning away curious personnel who had been drawn by the unusual commotion and dramatically increased security presence. Admiral Meredith himself approached Blackwood directly, completely ignoring established protocol and court procedures. Instead of the anger, indignation, or disappointment one might expect from a senior officer towards someone accused of serious military crimes, there was something approaching reverence in his steel, gray eyes. He offered a subtle but unmistakable nod of respect before speaking in a voice that carried both recognition and profound implications. "Commander, it's been far too long. 4 years, 7 months. Admiral," Blackwood replied with the precision of someone who had counted every day since the official disbanding. "We all thought you were dead," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of genuine grief and relief. "The reports, the classified findings, everything indicated total loss. Some days I was," she answered simply, then turned away as Chen approached with bewilderment and growing understanding evident in her expression and posture. In the secure conference room where they waited during the extended recess, Blackwood stood at the reinforced window, watching the frantic activity unfolding across the naval base. Official vehicles moved with obvious urgency between buildings, their routes suggesting high-level emergency protocols. Security personnel had materialized around the courthouse perimeter in numbers that spoke of national security implications far beyond a simple court-martial. "You owe me a complete explanation," Chen said finally, breaking the tense silence that had stretched between them for nearly 20 minutes. "I can't represent you properly. I can't even begin to understand what's happening if you don't trust me with the truth." Blackwood turned from the window, her expression serious but no longer guarded in the way it had been throughout the proceedings. "What's your security clearance level, Major?" "Your actual clearance, not your basic credentials. TSSCI with multiple additional compartments," Chun replied, referring to some of the highest security clearances available to military legal professionals. "I've successfully defended JSA operators, CI contractors, and NSA personnel in cases involving the most sensitive national security matters." "JSOC," Blackwood repeated with the faintest hint of a smile that held no humor, only grim recognition. 4 years ago, Major, I commanded a unit that didn't officially exist anywhere in the military structure. We handled operations that couldn't happen according to any official policy, missions that even JSOC wouldn't touch due to political sensitivity or operational impossibility. "Crimson Eclipse," Chen said, understanding beginning to dawn as pieces of a complex puzzle started falling into place. "Yes, we were what intelligence professionals call a phantom unit, Major. On paper, according to every official record and document, I was assigned to routine training billets at various installations across the country and overseas. In reality, my handpicked team operated in locations where American forces couldn't officially be present, conducting missions that needed to be accomplished, but could never be acknowledged, documented, or discussed in any official capacity." Wu Chen processed this information carefully, her legal mind working through the implications. "What happened to your team, Commander? What ended Crimson Eclipse?" Blackwood's expression hardened, and for the first time, Chen saw the full weight of command responsibility and survivor's guilt that her client carried. "Our final mission went catastrophically wrong due to what we now know was deliberately compromised intelligence. We were sent into a situation with information that was not just incomplete, it was intentionally false and designed to ensure our failure." She unconsciously touched her side, where Chen now realized a significant, and likely life-threatening injury must have occurred. "I was medically retired on paper after extensive treatment, then quietly reactivated 10 months later under my original SEAL designation when my injuries healed sufficiently. The unit was officially disbanded and all records classified beyond normal access levels, which is the military's convenient way of saying something never existed in the first place." "And Thornfield?" Chen asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. "What's his specific connection to all of this?" "Judge Thornfield was a key member of the Legal Oversight Committee that authorized that final mission," Blackwood said, her voice hardening with controlled anger that had been building for years. "He was a captain then, serving as primary legal counsel to the Joint Committee that approved our operations and provided legal justification for missions that existed in gray areas of international and military law. He personally signed off on the mission parameters for our final operation, despite red flags in the intelligence that any experienced legal officer should have caught. And now he's about to face something he never expected." Chen observed. "Justice," Blackwood replied simply. "Accountability for decisions that cost 8 American lives." When court reconvened exactly 2 hours later, the transformation was complete and stunning. Judge Thornfield was conspicuously absent from the bench. In his place sat Admiral Helena Rodriguez, a legendary figure in naval intelligence circles whose mere presence sent shock waves through the military justice system and clearly communicated the extraordinary nature of what was unfolding. New faces occupied the prosecution table as well. Captain Sterling had been completely replaced by a civilian attorney flanked by military personnel, whose insignia identified them as Jage Corps officers, but with additional markings that indicated attachment to naval intelligence and other specialized agencies. The gallery had been systematically cleared of all but the highest-ranking observers and those with direct, official involvement in proceedings that had clearly escalated far beyond a routine court-martial. "This tribunal is now in session," Admiral Rodriguez announced, her authoritative voice requiring no gavel or raised tone to command absolute attention from everyone present. "In light of newly accessible classified information and evidence that has come to light during these proceedings, this court-martial is hereby dissolved and all charges dismissed by direct order of the Secretary of Defense, effective immediately. All records of these proceedings are classified top secret with additional compartments, effective immediately." She turned her attention directly to Blackwood with an expression that combined respect, regret, and recognition of extraordinary circumstances. "Commander Blackwood, please approach the bench." A Blackwood moved forward with military precision that seemed somehow different, more confident, more authoritative than she had appeared throughout the trial. Admiral Rodriguez descended from the bench and met her halfway in the center of the courtroom, an unprecedented break with military court protocol that signified something momentous to every trained observer present. From a leather portfolio that bore the highest classification markings, Rodriguez withdrew Blackwood's service sidearm, ceremonially returning it in a gesture that symbolized the complete restoration of trust, authority, and recognition of her status as an officer in good standing. "Commander Blackwood, on behalf of the United States Navy, the Department of Defense, and the grateful nation you have served with extraordinary distinction, I extend our deepest and most sincere apologies for the misunderstanding, injustice, and failure of our system that brought you before this tribunal," Rodriguez said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hushed courtroom and ensuring that her words would be recorded for history. "Your service record has been amended to accurately reflect your actions during Operation Nightfall, which are now officially recognized as consistent with the highest traditions of naval service, military honor, and the protection of innocent life." The revelation continued to unfold through carefully chosen words as Rodriguez addressed the reduced but highly significant audience. Without explicitly confirming classified details that would compromise ongoing operations, she made it unmistakably clear that Blackwood was not merely a SEAL commander, but had led Crimson Eclipse, a specialized unit whose operations remained among the most closely guarded secrets in modern military history. Commander Blackwood's refusal to follow orders during Operation Nightfall was not, as characterized by the original prosecution, an act of weakness, indecision, or insubordination. Rodriguez explained with the authority of someone speaking for the highest levels of government. Based on her unique operational experience with similar intelligence patterns, she recognized signatures and indicators matching a previous operation that had resulted in catastrophic outcomes and significant loss of American lives. She wasn't disobeying orders, she was preventing the repetition of circumstances that had previously led to the deaths of her entire team. A junior officer approached Rodriguez with a folder marked with security classifications, which she reviewed briefly before continuing with information that would reshape everyone's understanding of recent events. Additionally, this court has received comprehensive documentation indicating that former Judge Advocate Thornfield had significant undisclosed conflicts of interest in this case, having been directly involved in the legal authorization chain for previous operations that were directly relevant to Commander Blackwood's decision, making process and tactical assessment. Blackwood remained at attention throughout this extraordinary vindication, her expression neutral despite the complete reversal of fortune unfolding around her. Only those who had known her during her classified service might have detected the slight relaxation in her shoulders as years of carried guilt, responsibility, and survivor's burden began to lift from her conscience. As Admiral Rodriguez concluded the formal proceedings, she addressed Blackwood once more with words that would mark a new chapter in both their careers. "All charges against you are dismissed with prejudice. Commander, you are completely exonerated and restored to full active duty status. Report to my office at 0700 tomorrow morning for discussion of your next assignment and new operational responsibilities." The following morning, Commander Zara Blackwood entered a completely nondescript office building in Coronado that appeared from the outside to house routine administrative functions. Her new security credentials granted her access to a private elevator that descended far deeper than the building's official blueprints would ever indicate. When the polished steel doors opened, she found herself in a state of the art operations center that rivaled anything she had seen during her years with the most classified special operations units. 6 individuals waited in the center of the room, each standing at attention as she entered. Their positioning and bearing immediately told her that these were not administrative staff or support personnel, but operational specialists selected for their specific expertise and capabilities. "Commander on deck," announced a familiar voice that belonged to the civilian note-taker from her court-martial proceedings, now dressed in tactical gear that revealed her true professional identity rather than the cover role she had played during the legal proceedings. "At ease, everyone," Blackwood replied automatically, her eyes sweeping the room to assess both the personnel and the impressive array of technological resources at their disposal. "Let's begin with proper introductions and background briefings. Lieutenant Sophia Montague, Signals Intelligence and Electronic Warfare Specialist." The former courtroom observer began, her posture and tone now revealing years of specialized training and operational experience. "I served with Chief Isabella Hartwell before her assignment to Crimson Eclipse. It's been an honor to work toward this moment, Commander." One by one, the others introduced themselves with the precise efficiency of professionals who understood that every detail mattered in their line of work. Each brought highly specialized skills in areas ranging from counterintelligence and surveillance to advanced tactical operations and forensic analysis. Most significantly, each had some connection, either personal or professional, to her former team members, creating a sense of shared purpose and personal investment that went far beyond normal unit cohesion. "Unit designation and call sign," asked the tactical specialist, a former Marine Force reconnaissance operator whose bearing suggested extensive combat experience in the most challenging environments. Blackwood thought carefully about the 8 graves she had visited the previous evening, the stones placed in remembrance of promises made and kept, and the mission that now lay before them. The name came to her with the clarity of absolute certainty. "Shadow Vigil," she decided, her voice carrying the authority of command and the weight of memorial purpose. "Because we stand watch for those who no longer can, and we operate in the shadows to protect those who serve in the light." As her new team began the detailed process of briefing her on their first potential operation, a complex investigation into the source of compromised intelligence had been responsible for multiple special operations failures over the past several years, Blackwood felt the presence of her fallen teammates guiding this new beginning. Their sacrifice would finally have the meaning and purpose that had been denied by official cover-ups and administrative failures. Justice for the fallen would not come through public vindication or courtroom victories, but through the patient, methodical work of professionals operating in the shadows where such work had always been most effective. The wheels of accountability had begun turning with Judge Thornfield's disgrace and resignation, but he had been merely the first thread in a much larger tapestry of corruption and betrayal that reached levels they were only beginning to understand. For Zara Blackwood and the operators of Shadow Vigil, the mission parameters were crystal clear. Honor the memory of the fallen by protecting those still serving. Identify and neutralize the domestic threats that had compromised American operations, and ensure that the sacrifice of Crimson Eclipse would serve as the foundation for something better and more secure. The camera slowly pulls back to reveal the operations center in its full scope and complexity, with Commander Blackwood at its heart, a leader reborn from the ashes of institutional failure. A ghost returning from the shadows with renewed purpose and the resources necessary to achieve justice. The sole survivor of a betrayed unit had now become the commander of a new team dedicated to ensuring that such betrayals could never happen again. The graves at Arlington National Cemetery continued their silent vigil, but now those sacrifices carried meaning through the continued service of those who remembered. Last Vengeance and others like them might believe they had successfully buried the truth, along with the operators who had discovered it. But they had only succeeded in awakening something far more dangerous and determined than they could possibly imagine. The hunt for justice had begun, and this time, the hunters had the full backing of those who understood that some debts can only be paid in full.